This injured beast was just a pet, it belonged to an alien ruler. Human found an injured beast and saved it, not knowing it was the pet of the baroness. Blood dripped from Asher's fingertips as he cradled the creature in his arms, its labored breathing a whisper against his chest, the white striped fur, matted with crimson, was unlike anything he'd encountered in his 7 years as Nexus 7's only veterinarian. Whatever this animal was, it wasn't in any of his databases. Hold on, he murmured, trudging through the station's maintenance corridor, the creature's claws dug deeper into his forearm. As if understanding his words, the service lift groaned as it carried them down to level 3, where his clinic sat nestled between cargo bays and forgotten storage units. The station's designers had made it clear where animals ranked in their priorities. Asher had been returning from a supply run to the outer docks when he'd found it collapsed near an emergency airlock, bleeding from what appeared to be energy weapon wounds. Who would shoot such a magnificent creature? Doctor Hayes, you're bleeding all over my clean floor again, his automated assistant chirped as he stumbled through the clinic door. Mute protocols, Asher commanded, gently placing the creature on his examination table. Full xenobiology scan priority alpha. The overhead scanner hummed to life, bathing the animal in soft blue light. Asher worked quickly, applying pressure to the worst of the wounds while the scanner compiled its data. Unknown species, the system announced. Closest match Felida sapiens, variant 78%. Confidence that can't be right, Asher muttered, reaching for a regenerative gel pack. Felida sapiens were sentient humanoids from the Cygnes quadrant, aristocratic, powerful, and notoriously private. This was clearly an animal, albeit an unusually intelligent one. The creature's eyes snapped open, startling amber against the black scara, and it hissed, revealing needle-sharp fangs. Its paw lashed out with surprising strength, nearly catching Asher's face. Easy, Asher said, keeping his voice low and steady. I'm trying to help you. The creature stilled those alien eyes, studying him with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. There was something almost person-like in that gaze. Asher administered a mild sedative, just enough to ease the pain without forcing unconsciousness. As the medication took effect, the creature's muscles relaxed, and it sank back onto the table with a sound disturbingly close to a sigh. The scanner beeped with completed results, displaying a holographic anatomy that made Asher's eyebrows rise. The creature's internal structure was fascinating, more complex than any non-sentient species he'd treated. Multiple hearts, reinforced skeletal structure, neural pathways that suggested high intelligence. What are you? He whispered, gently cleaning the wounds. The worst injury was a precision strike that had nearly severed a major artery, too precise to be accidental. Someone had wanted this creature to bleed out slowly. 4 hours later, Asher slumped against his desk, exhausted but satisfied. The creature slept peacefully in a recovery chamber, its vital signs stable. He'd had to improvise with the treatment, combining protocols for 3 different species and hopping his educated guesses. Wouldn't kill the patient. His comm unit chimed with an incoming station alert. Asher swiped it open with a blood-stained finger. Attention, all personnel, Commander Tiro's voice announced the diplomatic vessel Crimson Claw has requested emergency docking privileges. Security protocols will be elevated to level 2 until further notice. All non-essential personnel are to remain in designated areas. Asher frowned. Diplomatic vessels rarely visited Nexus 7. The station was too remote, too unimportant in the grand scheme of interstellar politics. A soft trill from the recovery chamber drew his attention. The creature was awake, ears flattened against its skull, eyes wide with what Asher could only describe as fear. You heard that, didn't you? Asher said, approaching slowly. Something about that ship has you spooked. The creature's gaze locked with his, and then, deliberately, with purpose that no mere animal should possess it, extended a paw toward him. Asher hesitated, then reached out. The creature's paw pressed against his palm, and a jolt of something, electricity communication, passed between them. What the hell? Asher gasped, pulling back the overhead speakers. Crackled again. Dr. Hayes to docking bay 3. Commander Tiro ordered, bring your medical kit. We have a diplomatic situation. Asher glanced at the creature, who was now trying to rise from the chamber. Oh no, you don't, he said, gently but firmly pressing it back down. You've lost too much blood. Whatever's going on, you're staying right here until You're stable, the creature growled, but its strength was clearly depleted. It sank. Back those intelligent eyes, never leaving Asher's face. I'll be back, Asher promised, grabbing his emergency kit. Computer secure recovery, chamber 1 no access except medical override haze. Alpha 3. As the clinic door slid shut behind him, Asher couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just been drawn into something far more complex than treating an injured animal, whatever this creature was. Someone had tried to kill it, and now a diplomatic vessel had arrived with suspicious timing. Nexus 7 was about to become a lot more interesting than the backwater assignment Asher had signed up for. Asher returned to his clinic 3 hours later, shoulders tight with tension. The diplomatic situation had been nothing more than Commander Tiro parading him in front of some minor officials searching for a lost asset they'd asked pointed questions about unusual creatures, scanning his face for signs of deception. Asher had played dumb, citing the hundreds of exotic pets that passed through the station with traveling merchants. He wasn't sure why he'd lied. Something about the officials' cold eyes and the calculated way they described their missing property had triggered his protective instincts. The clinic doors slid open, and Asher froze. The recovery chamber was empty, its glass dome pushed aside. Damn it, he muttered, dropping his kit and scanning the room. Here, kitty, kitty. A low growl emanated from beneath his desk. Asher crouched down to find the creature wedged into the corner, amber eyes glowing in the shadows. You shouldn't be moving around, Asher said softly. Those tissue regenerators need time to work. The creature's ears flicked forward, and it made a chirping sound that raised the hair on Asher's arms. It was trying to communicate. I'm going to need a name for you, Asher said, extending his hand slowly. How about Nyx? You remind me of the night sky on old Earth, all that darkness with bright stars scattered through. The creature Nyx tilted its head, then carefully extended a paw and placed it in Asher's palm. Another jolt passed between them, milder this time, accompanied by a fleeting impression of gratitude. Are you telepathic? Asher whispered, amazed. Is that how you're communicating? Nyx blinked slowly, then crawled forward, wincing as the movement pulled at healing wounds. Asher carefully lifted the creature, nodding that it weighed far more than its size suggested. Dense muscle beneath that silky fur. Back to bed with you, he said, returning Nyx to the recovery chamber. Those weren't regular officials out there. They're looking for you, and they don't seem friendly. Asher checked the dressings, pleased to see the regenerative therapy was working. The wounds were closing cleanly, though several would leave scars beneath the striped fur. Computer analyze blood sample, Asher ordered, placing a vial into the diagnostic unit. Compare against all known sentient species in the database while the system worked. Asher pulled up a chair beside the recovery chamber. 48 hours without sleep was catching up to him, but he couldn't rest. Yet not with suspicious officials prowling the station and his mysterious patient still critical. You're something special, aren't you? Asher murmured, watching Nyx's eyes grow heavy. Someone went to a lot of trouble to hurt you. The creature's paw pressed against the transparent dome, as if reaching for him. Asher placed his palm against the other side, and even through the barrier he felt a faint connection, a warmth that spread up his arm. Genetic analysis complete, the computer announced. Sample contains markers consistent with royal bloodline of Fetus sapiens, specifically the Thayan dynasty. Warning: possession of genetic material from Thayan royalty without explicit consent is a Class 1 diplomatic offense. Asher's blood ran cold. Thayan dynasty, the ruling family of the most powerful feline humanoids in the quadrant. If this creature belonged to them, what have I got myself into? Nyx, Asher whispered. The creature's eyes had closed, exhaustion finally winning out. Asher leaned back in his chair, mind racing. He needed to research the Thesian dynasty immediately. 3 hours and 17 restricted database access violations later. Asher had pieced together a troubling picture. The Thayan rulers were known to keep companions, highly evolved creatures genetically linked to their owners. These companions were extensions of the royals themselves, sharing a psychic bond, and even biological markers. Harming one was equivalent to a direct attack on royalty. Asher's eyes burned with fatigue as he scrolled through images of the current ruling family. The young Baroness Kalira had recently assumed control following her mother's suspicious death. Political rivals questioned her readiness to rule. There were whispers of impending civil War his search was interrupted by a station-wide announcement that sent ice through his veins. Attention all personnel, Commander Tiro's voice boomed. We are honored to announce the arrival of Her Excellency Baroness Kalira of the Derjan dynasty, all section heads. Report to Docking Bay 1 for formal reception. Security protocols elevated to level 1. Nix's eyes snapped, open ears perked forward. The creature tried to stand, making plaintive noises that tore at Asher's heart. That's your owner, isn't it? Asher said, gently pressing Nix back down, the Baroness herself. Nix chirped urgently, claws scraping against the chamber dome. Asher made a split-second decision that would change his life forever. You're not stable enough to move, he said firmly, and I don't trust those officials who were here earlier. We're going to hide you until I can assess the situation. He deactivated the recovery chamber and carefully lifted Nix. Computer medical emergency protocol. Hey Sigma 9. A section of wall panel slid aside, revealing a small isolation room designed for quarantine cases. Asher had never needed to use it. It's not comfortable, he apologized, settling Nix onto the padded surface, but it's shielded from bioscans. No one will find you here until I'm sure it's safe. Nix's eyes held his for a long moment, then deliberately the creature leaned forward and pressed its forehead against Asher's. The connection bloomed, instantly stronger than before, carrying impressions of trust and fear and urgency. I'll protect you, Asher promised. Throat tight with an emotion he couldn't name, rest now as he sealed the hidden room. Asher knew he was probably committing a dozen interstellar crimes, hiding the companion of a baroness, interfering in high politics. He should be terrified. Instead, he felt strangely certain he was doing exactly what he was meant to do. Asher scrubbed his hands, changed into a clean uniform, and headed for the diplomatic reception. It was time to meet the Baroness and determine whether she was a threat to the creature he'd come to care for, or if she was as much a victim as her companion. Either way, life on Nexus 7 would never be the same again. Nexus 7's main reception hall, typically a utilitarian space used for crew gatherings, had been hastily transformed into something resembling a diplomatic venue. Maintenance drones had polished every surface, and someone had unearthed ceremonial flags that hadn't seen use in decades. Asher stood at the back of the assembled station personnel, fighting to keep his eyes open. 72 hours without proper sleep was pushing the limits of his stim patches. His thoughts kept drifting to Nix, hidden away in his clinic. Wounded and afraid, Commander Tiro paced nervously at the front of the room, his usually pristine uniform adorned with additional medals Asher had never seen before. The commander caught Asher's eye and frowned, motioning him forward. You look like hell haze, Tiro muttered as Asher approached. This is a diplomatic reception, not one of your veterinary emergencies. Sorry, sir, Asher said, stifling a yawn. Been catching up on bacterial cultures. Tara's retort was cut short by the hiss of the grand doors sliding open. The station's modest security detail formed an honor guard, and a hush fell over the crowd. 4 tall figures entered, first feline humanoids with sleek black fur and ceremonial armor, their eyes scanning the room with predatory intensity. The guards stepped to the sides, forming a path for the figure who entered next. Asher's breath caught in his throat. Baroness Kalira was nothing like the dignified, aloof royal he had imagined. She was young, perhaps his age, and moved with a fluid grace that made every human in the room appear awkward by comparison. Her fur was a stunning pattern of white stripes against a silver-gray background, identical to Nix's markings. She wore a form-fitting diplomatic uniform in deep crimson that accentuated every curve, and a simple circlet of some dark metal rested between her elegantly pointed ears, but it was her eyes that held Asher. Transfixed amber irises against black sclera, exactly like her companion's. Those eyes swept the room with cool assessment before landing on Commander Tiro. Your Excellency, Tiro said, bowing deeply. Nexus 7 is honored by your presence. Had we known of your arrival earlier, we would have prepared a more suitable. My visit was not planned, Kira interrupted, her voice a melodic purr that seemed to vibrate in Asher's chest. I come seeking something precious that was taken from me. Her accent was exotic, but perfect. Each word precisely formed. Asher noticed her claws, retractable like Nix's, were partially extended, belying her calm demeanor. Of course, Your Excellency, Tiro stammered. My security chief informed me Of your missing property, I assure you we've conducted thorough scans of the station. A flicker of something annoyance anger crossed Kira's features at the word property. My companion is not property, Commander, she said, each word edged with ice. Nix is an extension of myself. Our bond is sacred. Asher's heart thumped harder at the name, so he'd somehow intuited the creature's real name, another piece of evidence that some form of telepathic connection had formed between them. My apologies, Your Excellency, Tiro said quickly. I've assembled our section heads to assist in your search. All station resources are at your disposal. Kaler's gaze slid over the line of officers until it reached Asher. He felt a jolt of awareness pass between them, her pupils dilating slightly as she studied him. And who might you be? She asked, stepping closer. Asher was acutely aware of his rumpled appearance and the stubble on his jaw, but he met her gaze steadily. Dr. Asher Hayes, Your Excellency, station veterinarian and xenobiologist, a healer of animals, she said, the words carrying no trace of the condescension he might have expected. Instead, she seemed intrigued. Tell me, Dr. Hayes, have you treated any unusual creatures recently? Every instinct told Asher to lie to protect Nix until he understood the full situation, but looking into Kira's eyes, so like her companions, he found he couldn't form the words, I treat many species that pass through the station. He said carefully, some might be considered unusual depending on one's perspective. A smile curved her lips, revealing the tips of delicate fangs. Indeed, she said softly, perspective is everything. One of her guards stepped forward, leaning down to whisper in her ear. Kalira's expression hardened. It seems my advanced team has detected traces of Thasianian blood in the station's lower levels, she announced, her gaze never leaving Asher's face near the medical facilities. Commander Tiro turned to Asher with narrowed eyes. Hayes, is there something you'd like to share with her? Excellency, Asher's mind raced. Nix was hidden in a shielded room. How had they detected anything unless the connection between Baroness and companion worked both ways? Perhaps she could sense Nix's presence through their bond. Your Excellency, Asher said, addressing Kalira directly, I believe we should speak privately about this matter. A ripple of whispers spread through the assembled crew. Commander Tiro's face flushed with anger at the breach of protocol. Dr. Pays, he sputtered, you will answer the question directly or face. I will speak with the doctor alone, Kalira declared, silencing the commander with a raised hand. My guards will remain outside. Your Excellency, I must advise against, one of her guards began. That wasn't a request, Ravik, she said, her tone brooking no argument. The doctor and I will use the station's conference room. We are not to be disturbed. The guard named Ravik glowered at Asher with open hostility but stepped back with a stiff bow. As you command, Baroness. Commander Tiro looked like he might have a seizure but managed a tight nod. Of course, Your Excellency, this way, please. As Asher followed Kira from the reception hall, he felt the stares of everyone present burning into his back. Whatever happened next would determine not only his fate but Nix's as well. He had to tread carefully. The conference room door slid shut behind them with a soft hiss, leaving them alone. Kali immediately abandoned her regal posture, turning to Asher with an intensity that made him step back. Where is Nix? She demanded, her calm facade crumbling. I can feel that he's alive but in pain. What have you done with him? I saved his life, Asher replied. Meeting her fierce gaze, he was attacked. Precision energy weapon wounds designed to cause a slow death. I found him near the outer docks 3 days ago. Cal's eyes widened, her composure faltering. Further 3 days, he's been missing for a week. I thought her voice broke and she turned away, shoulders trembling. The sight of her vulnerability cracked something in Asher's chest. Without thinking, he reached out, touching her arm gently. He's going to be okay. I've treated his wounds and he's responding well to regenerative therapy. She stiffened at his touch but didn't pull away. Instead, she turned back to face him, and Asher was startled to see moisture glistening in her alien eyes. Take me to him, she said, no longer a command but a plea. Please. In that moment, Asher knew with certainty that whatever plot had led to Nix's injury, Baroness Kira was not the architect. The bond between them was genuine, a connection so deep he could almost feel it himself. This way, he said, leading her toward the door, but we should avoid your guards. I don't trust them. Kira's expression darkened. Nor should you not. All who serve me do so willingly. she stepped closer, her scent like exotic spices and something wild enveloping him. Dr. Hayes, if you've truly saved Nyx, you have my eternal gratitude, but understand this, we are now both in grave danger. Asher's pulse quickened a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through him. Then we'd better hurry. As they slipped from the conference room, taking a maintenance corridor toward his clinic, Asher realized his life had just become entangled with one of the most powerful beings in the quadrant, and despite every logical reason to be terrified, he couldn't ignore the electric awareness that sparked between them with every shared glance. Dangerous indeed. The medical equipment hummed softly as Asher adjusted the tissue regenerator over Nyx's deepest wound. Beside him, Baroness Kalira stood motionless, her amber eyes never leaving her companion's sleeping form. The molecular pattern is fascinating, Asher said, breaking the tense silence. Your biology shares key markers with Nyx's, but there are distinct differences I've never seen. Documented twitch slightly forward, a gesture Asher had begun to recognize as interest. Our bond is physiological as well as spiritual. The Thesian royal line has maintained companion relationships for 16 generations, like biological quantum entanglement. Asher mused, adjusting the scanner that would explain how you sensed him. Despite my shielded room, you understand quickly for a human, she said, the words carrying no bite. Despite their potential for condescension, most outsiders view our companions as mere pets or status symbols. Asher smiled tiredly. I became a veterinarian because I believe all sentient beings deserve care and respect regardless of form. Intelligence comes in many packages. Something in Kira's posture softened that is refreshing in my court. Such perspective is rare. For 3 days they worked together in Asher's clinic, treating Nyx while avoiding Kira's increasingly suspicious guards. Commander Tiro had been told the Baroness was conducting a private investigation, buying them precious time during the long hours. Their conversations deepened beyond Nyx's care. Asher found himself sharing stories of his childhood on a terraformed agricultural moon where animals outnumbered people 20 to 1. You chose Exile on this station, Kalira asked once, handing him a surgical tool before he could request it. Their rhythm increasingly synchronized. Not Exile purpose, Asher corrected. Nexus 7 needed a veterinarian. No one else wanted the position. So you sacrificed personal comfort for duty, she observed, helping him dress Nyx's healing wounds. We have that in common, Doctor. Gradually, Kalira revealed the pressure she faced as a young ruler, the counselors who undermined her authority, the neighboring systems testing her resolve, the constant threat of assassination that had followed her mother's suspicious death. I was meant to study xenobiology, she admitted one night, her voice low as Nyx purred between them. Not rule an empire before my 30th year, yet here you are, Asher replied, noticing how the overhead lights caught silver highlights in her striped fur, crossing the quadrant. For your companion, when most rulers would have sent agents, Nyx is not merely a companion, she said fiercely. He is my heart outside my body. I could no more abandon him than cease breathing. Her passion ignited something in Asher's chest, admiration mingled with a dangerous warmth he dared not name. Each accidental brush of their hands sent electricity along his nerves. Each shared glance lasted a heartbeat longer than necessary. On the 4th night, Asher caught himself staring at the elegant line of her throat as she bent over Nyx, his professional detachment crumbling. Despite his best efforts, you should rest, Kalira said, catching his exhausted gaze. You've barely slept since I arrived. I'm fine, he insisted, but swayed slightly on his feet. Her hand caught his arm, steadying him through his thin medical uniform. Her touch burned like a brand. Even the most dedicated healer requires rest, Dr. Asher, he corrected softly. If we're hiding from assassins together, you might as well use my name. A smile curved her lips, revealing the delicate points of her fangs. Asher, she repeated his name, a gentle purr in her exotic accent. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of boundaries crossed and protocols abandoned. Despite every difference between their species, despite the political chasm separating a station veterinarian from a galactic baroness, the attraction crackling between them was undeniable. Asher knew he was walking a dangerous path. She was Thayan royalty, he was a human exile on a forgotten station. Yet As her amber eyes held his filled with a warmth that matched the heat in his own blood, he couldn't bring himself to care. Some things transcended species politics and reason. His neural activity is almost normal, Asher said, studying the holographic display above Nix's sleeping form. I'd say another 48 hours of regenerative therapy, and he should be the clinic. Door exploded inward with a deafening boom, throwing Asher and Kalira to the floor. Smoke poured into the room as emergency sirens wailed. Containment breach in medical sector 3. The station computer announced calmly. Security protocols engaged. Asher's ears rang as he pushed himself up, searching frantically for Kira through the thickening smoke. He found her crouched protectively over Nick's, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead, eyes wide and alert. Stay down, she hissed as shadowy figures moved through the destroyed doorway. Two silhouettes advanced through the smoke, humanoid but moving with mechanical precision. One raised an arm, and Asher glimpsed the distinctive barrel of a pulse disruptor, militarira, and highly illegal. Without thinking, Asher lunged for the nearest cabinet, grabbing a canister of aerosol sedative meant for large predator species. As the first assassin took aim at Kalira, Asher hurled the canister with all his strength. The resulting explosion of pressurized gas engulfed the attackers, their mechanical movements faltering as the powerful sedative filled their lungs. But the second assassin managed to fire before collapsing, a bright beam of energy cutting through the smoke directly toward Kali. She twisted at the last instant, but the beam caught her shoulder, sending her spinning to the floor with a pained cry. Asher scrambled to her side as Nix let out a keening wail, struggling to rise. Despite his injuries, emergency lockdown, Asher commanded, pressing his hand against the blood flowing from Kira's wound. Computer administer emergency protocol. Haze Omega 6 armored panels slid down over the shattered doorway as medical drones activated, flooding the room with targeted antiseptic mist to clear the air. Asher worked quickly, applying pressure to Kira's injury while scanning for additional damage. The same weapon, she gasped, her pupils dilated with pain. The same signature as Nix's wounds. Realization dawned like ice water in Asher's veins. This wasn't random. Nix wasn't collateral damage in some political scheme. He was bait. Kalira nodded grimly, fangs bared in a pained grimace. They knew I would come for him personally. This remote station, minimal security, perfect killing ground. Asher helped her onto an examination table adjacent to Nix, who had dragged himself closer despite his healing wounds. Distressed growls emanating from his throat. The weapon caused cellular disruption, Asher said, examining the injury. Standard treatments won't work. Then I die here, stated flatly, her composure returning despite the pain. A fitting end for a fool who walked willingly into a trap. Not on my watch, Asher replied, mind racing through his years of xenobiological research. There's an experimental therapy I developed for cross-species tissue regeneration. It's risky, but do it, she commanded, her eyes locked on his. I trust you. Those 3 words hit Asher with unexpected force. He worked with frantic precision, combining compounds never meant for Thesian physiology, praying his theoretical knowledge would translate to practical treatment. The procedure was intimate by necessity, requiring him to monitor her heartbeats manually, to touch her in ways that crossed all boundaries of royal protocol. As he worked, their eyes remained locked, something profound passing between them with each labored breath. She took my guards, she whispered as the regenerative serum began to take effect. They must have been compromised, Commander Tiro 2. Asher agreed, grimly examining the unconscious assassins. These aren't random mercenaries. They're wearing modified Nexus security armor. The coup has already begun, Kalira said, strength returning to her voice as the treatment worked. My absence from the palace. They must have seized control already. Nix pushed his head under her hand, a deep rumble in his chest. Kira stroked him absently, her political mind clearly racing through calculations. We need to go, Asher said, gathering emergency supplies. They'll send more when these 2 don't report back. Where, Kali asked, struggling to sit up. The entire station is compromised. Asher's mouth curved in a grim smile. I have a small medical transport for off-station emergencies. It's not much, but it's stocked for extended missions and registered under a research designation. Not my name. Kira's eyes widened. You Would flee with me, become a fugitive from your own people. I became involved the moment I saved Nyx, Asher replied. Helping her stand besides these aren't my people, if they're willing to assassinate a foreign dignitary. As sirens blared and security announcements echoed through the station, Asher gathered Nyx in his arms while Kali, leaning heavily on his shoulder, palmed his emergency medical kit there. Eyes met in silent agreement. They had passed beyond the point of return. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Initiating emergency medical evacuation protocol, Asher announced into the comm unit as he guided the small transport away from Nexus 7. Patient condition critical, returning when stable, Commander. Tiero's voice crackled through the speaker's haze. You are ordered to dock immediately. The Baroness has been. Asher cut the transmission with a sharp gesture that should buy us a few hours before they realize we're not coming back. The medical transport, little more than a shuttle with advanced life support systems, hummed around them, designed for a single medical officer and up to 3 patients. The cramped quarters forced them into constant proximity. Kira sat in the co-pilot seat, her regal posture incongruous against the utilitarian surroundings. Nyx lay curled in a makeshift nest between them, his breathing finally even and deep. We should reach the Galarian Nebula within 18 hours, Asher said, checking the navigation system. There's an unregistered research outpost on asteroid KDX 419 that might shelter us. Kali nodded, her eyes distant. By now my enemies will have secured the palace. My loyal counselors imprisoned or executed, decades of progress gone. Her hands trembled slightly before she clenched them into fists. Your people still need you, Asher said gently. Well, find a way back. She turned to him, vulnerability naked in her amber eyes. Why are you doing this? You could have handed me over, claimed a reward, lived in luxury. That's not who I am, he replied simply. Besides, I've grown rather fond of Nyx's package deal, right? A smile ghosted across her features before fatting. She reached out, touching the stubbled line of his jaw with surprising gentleness. You are a strange human, Asher. Haze, the small vessel, carried them through the darkness of space automated systems, humming as they tended to Nyx's remaining wounds together. The mundane tasks, changing dressings, administering medication, monitoring vital signs, created a strange domesticity in their shared exile. Slowly Kalira's formal veneer cracked. She shed her elaborate diplomatic uniform for simple medical scrubs. Without the trappings of royalty, she seemed younger, more accessible. She asked endless questions about Asher's work, his childhood, his dreams, as if cataloging everything about this human who had upended her existence in turn. Asher glimpsed the person beneath the Baroness, a brilliant mind with a passion for xenobiology that matched his own, a leader who had sacrificed personal ambitions for duty, a woman who hummed ancient Thasian lullabies to Nyx when she thought Asher couldn't hear. On the third night of their journey, as the ship's lights dimmed to simulate evening, Asher found Kalira trembling in the small galley area, a medical scanner clutched in her hands. What's wrong? He asked, immediately alert. Nyx's neural readings, she whispered, they're fluctuating. I can feel him pulling away. Asher quickly checked the scanner, relief washing through him. It's normal, his autonomous systems are finally reasserting he's healing, becoming independent again. He took her hands in his. It's good news, Kira. I thought I was losing him, she confessed, her customary strength crumbling after everything. I couldn't bear it without thinking. Asher pulled her against him, one hand stroking the soft fur between her ears as she shuddered with silent sobs. The contact was electric, her body radiated heat, her heart beat strong and quick against his chest. You're not alone, he murmured against her ear. I won't let you face this alone. She pulled back slightly, those alien eyes searching his face. In my culture, she said softly, such a declaration would be binding. The air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Asher knew he should step back, maintain professional distance. She was his patient's owner, a political refugee, a member of a different species entirely, yet as her hand slid up his chest as her head tilted in unmistakable invitation, rational thought abandoned him completely. Their first kiss was tentative, a careful exploration of alien territory. Her lips were softer than he expected, the points of her fangs a delicate danger against his tongue. She tasted of spices he couldn't name, her purr of pleasure vibrating through their connected bodies when they finally Separated, breathless, and startled by their own actions, Nyx watched them from his medical bed with what Asher could have sworn was feline approval. This complicates things, Asher said, his voice rough. Kali's answering laugh held a wildness that sent shivers down his spine. My dear doctor, she whispered, claws lightly tracing patterns on his nape. Things were complicated the moment you saved my heart. She drew him back to her, and Asher went willingly, leaving caution behind in the vast darkness of space. Surrounding their tiny vessel, the settlement of New Harmony sprawled across the valley floor, a hodgepodge of architectural styles reflecting the mixed species who called it home. From the ridge where they landed their disguised medical transport, Asher could see housing units built for a dozen different physiologies, all coexisting in apparent peace. Are you sure we'll be welcome? Kira asked, adjusting the simple cloak that concealed her distinctive markings. Nyx prowled at her feet, fully recovered and alert to any danger. New Harmony was founded by deserters and refugees from the last border war, Asher explained, shouldering their meager possessions. Their only rule is that old conflicts stay behind. No one asks where you came from or why you left their rented dwelling. Was modest, a single-story structure with adaptable environmental controls and a small garden enclosed by living bamboo. Not the palace Kalira deserved, but safety was their priority now. Days melted into weeks as they established a routine. Asher found work at the settlement's medical center, his knowledge of multiple species making him valuable. Kira, using a modified identity, offered translation services, her natural diplomatic skills earning them extra credits and connections. In the evenings, they explored their new relationship with careful wonder. Every discovery was a delight, the sensitive spots at the base of her ears that made her purr, the way her pupils expanded when she was aroused, the surprising strength in her life form. I never imagined finding happiness in exile, Kali confessed one night as they lay intertwined, her fur cool against his skin. Among my people, rulers mate for political advantage, not this. And what is this exactly? Asher asked. Tracing the stripes along her shoulder, she considered, head tilted in that distinctly feline way. Freedom, she finally said. With you I am simply Kira, not baroness, not ruler, not symbol. It wasn't all perfect. Cultural misunderstandings sparked occasional arguments, her royal expectations clashing with his practical nature, her territorial instincts conflicting with his human boundaries, yet each reconciliation brought deeper understanding. Asher found joy in introducing Kalira to experiences her sheltered royal upbringing had denied her. Together they waited in the settlement's central lake, her initial disgust at the sensation of mud between her toes transforming into childlike delight. He taught her to cook simple meals, laughing at her fastidious approach to handling ingredients. She in turn shared the cultural richness of her world, teaching him meditative techniques practiced by Thersian philosophers, recounting ancient legends beneath the strange stars of their adopted home. My royal tutors would be scandalized, she said one afternoon as they shopped in the settlement's bustling market, her hand casually entwined with his Isian baroness, haggling over produced prices. Scandalized by the haggling or by the human holding your hand? Asher teased, her smile turned wistful. Both. Our traditions are rigid. Interspecies relationships exist, but are never acknowledged in the upper echelons of society. She selected a purple fruit, examining it with expert care. My grandmother would have you executed for touching me. Ming family, Asher remarked dryly, yet those same traditions are strangling our development. Kalira continued, her political mind never truly at rest. Our isolation has led to stagnation. We need fresh perspectives, new alliances. Asher recognized the shift in her tone, the ruler reemerging from behind the exile's mask. These moments happened more frequently as the weeks passed. No matter how she embraced their simple life, Kalira was born to lead, and that calling tugged at her conscience. One evening, as twin moons rose over New Harmony, they sat in their small garden while Nyx hunted insects in the flowering bushes. Kira's silence held an unusual weight. You're thinking about home again, Asher observed, not a question. She nodded, ears flicking restlessly. My people deserve better than usurpers and assassins. The longer I hide, the stronger my enemies grow. Asher took her hand, feeling the careful retraction of her claws, a constant consideration for his frailer human skin. Do you regret this? He asked quietly. Her Her eyes flashed in the moonlight. "Never," she said fiercely. "You and Nyx are my true home now," but she paused. Searching for words, what if I could have both? What if we could change things? "You mean return?" Asher's heart tightened. "The same people who tried to kill you are still in power, yes, but they don't hold the people's loyalty," she countered. "The strategic ruler, emerging fully now. The Thayan populace revere tradition, but they also hunger for prosperity. If I returned with new philosophies, new alliances, if I showed them that cooperation with other species brings strength, the implications hung between them return would mean danger, politics, and scrutiny. Their relationship, born in crisis and nurtured in exile, would face its greatest test under the harsh lights of galactic politics. Whatever you decide," Asher said, drawing her close, "we face it together," as if understanding the weight of the moment. Nyx abandoned his hunt to press against them both, forming a circle of warmth against the cool night air. For now their haven remained secure, but Asher knew the peaceful interlude couldn't last forever. The ruler would eventually need to reclaim her throne, and when that day came, he would stand beside her. Regardless of the consequences, the warning came at dawn, a coded message from one of Kaler's loyal retainers who had finally tracked them to New Harmony. 3 ships had entered the system, their energy signatures matching known vessels used by the usurpers who had seized control of the Theresian throne. "They found us already moving with practice efficiency, gathering only essential items. We have less than 2 hours." Asher disabled the dwelling systems, erasing all evidence of their presence, while Kira encrypted their communication channels. Nyx paced restlessly, sensing their urgency. "The medical transport is too recognizable now," Asher said, checking his portable scanner. "We need alternative transportation." Kalira's eyes glinted with familiar determination. "I have an idea." An hour later, they were aboard a waste management vessel, hiding among refuge containers bound for the neighboring mining colony. The stench was overwhelming, but the ship's radiation signature masked their life signs from standard scanners. "Elegant accommodations, Your Excellency," Asher quipped, trying to lighten the mood as they huddled in the cramped maintenance compartment. Kira's answering smile was tight, but genuine, "Still better than some diplomatic functions I've attended." Through the viewport, they watched 3 sleek military vessels descend on New Harmony, their silhouettes predatory against the dawn sky. Their peaceful interlude was officially over. The waste transport docked at Haggard's Point, a grimy mining operation where questions were discouraged and credits were the only language universally understood. They bartered passage on a series of increasingly disreputable vessels, zigzagging across the sector to confuse pursuit. During their flight, Kali made contact with her remaining loyal network. The news grew progressively worse. Her cousin Rav, the same guard who had accompanied her to Nexus 7, had declared himself regent. Public executions of her supporters had become commonplace. Thayan treaties with neighboring systems were being systematically dismantled. "He's isolating our people, making them dependent on his protection," Kali growled, packing the narrow confines of their latest temporary shelter, a decommissioned communications relay. Classic authoritarian tactics. Asher monitored the secured channel, noting the increasing urgency in the encrypted messages. "Your loyalists are growing desperate. Without your return, they'll eventually lose hope." An alert chimed on their scanner. Ships approaching the relay station's orbit. Asher grabbed his medical bag, already moving toward their escape route, when the relay's ancient doors groaned and collapsed inward. Armored figures poured into the chamber, weapons raised. Nyx snarled, positioning himself protectively before Kalira as Asher reached for the small pulse disruptor they'd acquired during their journey. "Wait," Kali commanded, her voice cutting through the tension. "Examine their insignia." Asher paused, noticing the subtle markings on the intruder's armor. Not Ravik's usurped royal seal, but an older emblem. The lead figure removed her helmet, revealing feline features marked with ceremonial scars. "Commander Lyra." Kalira breathed, lowering her defensive stance. "My mother's royal guard, my baroness," the commander replied, dropping to one knee. "We've been searching for you since the coup. The resistance grows beneath Ravik's notice." Within hours, they were aboard the Shadowclaw, a sleek vessel hidden from official records. Kali immersed herself in tactical briefings with her loyal commanders, while Asher found himself suddenly an outsider, a human among Thesians who regarded him with suspicion despite Kalira's obvious trust late into the ship's artificial. Night Cycle Kalira found him in his assigned quarters, exhaustion etched in the droop of her ears. They don't trust me, Asher said without preamble. They don't know you, she corrected, sinking onto the bed beside him, but they will. You've shown more courage than most of my lifelong advisors. Indeed, throughout their harrowing escape, Asher had revealed depths that surprised even himself. When mercenaries had cornered them on Hexide Station, it was his knowledge of ventilation systems that had saved them. When Kalira had fallen ill from radiation exposure, his improvised treatments had preserved her life. With each crisis, the unassuming veterinarian had proven himself worthy of standing beside a galactic ruler. Your commander believes returning to Theia is suicide, Asher noted, recalling the heated discussions he'd overheard. It is. Kalira agreed calmly. If we approach conventionally, but I've been thinking about your medical transport's emergency protocols, the way you reprogrammed it to register as a research vessel. Asher raised an eyebrow. You want to use medical credentials to infiltrate a military blockade? Her smile was pure predator. Precisely, a pandemic is spreading through the lower levels of the capital. Ravok will need specialists, even alien ones. The audacity of her plan took Asher's breath away, yet as she outlined the details, he recognized its brilliance. His medical knowledge, once merely his profession, had become their most powerful weapon. It could work, he admitted, mind racing through the biological implications, but we'd need a convincing pathogen, something alarming enough to guarantee our entry, but controllable enough to prevent actual harm. That, she said, eyes gleaming, is why I need you, not just as my companion, but as a partner in this fight. The word companion carried weight beyond its ordinary meaning, a deliberate echo of her bond with Nyx, an acknowledgement of something profound and permanent between them. I'm just a veterinarian, Asher said softly, not a revolutionary. Kalira took his face between her hands, her claws carefully retracted. You were never just anything. Asher Hayes, you saved my heart twice over, first Nyx, then me. Her forehead pressed against his in Theian gesture of deepest intimacy. Now help me save my people. As the Shadowclaw accelerated toward Theian space, Asher knew they were heading into the heart of danger, yet for the first time since leaving Nexus 7, he felt a certainty that transcended fear. Whatever awaited them in the capital, they would face it together, the unlikely veterinarian and his royal mate. Rewriting the story of two worlds, the medical shuttle descended through Theia Prime's atmosphere, its exterior emblazoned with universal quarantine symbols. Inside, Asher adjusted his environmental suit, the helmet obscuring his human features. Beside him, Kiera, similarly disguised, reviewed the falsified credentials that identified them as specialists from the Galactic Health Consortium. Approaching Royal Medical Facility Commander LRA's voice came through their secure comms. Remember, we can only maintain this deception for 12 hours before the pathogen is recognized as benign. The pathogen in question, Asher's creation, was a modified version of a common feline respiratory virus engineered to present alarming symptoms. While causing no lasting damage, it had been selectively released in the capital's lower levels 3 days earlier, creating precisely the emergency they needed to gain entry. Ravok will be suspicious, Kalira murmured as the shuttle touched down on the palace's medical landing pad. He knows I wouldn't abandon my people, which is exactly why we're entering through the most heavily guarded facility, Asher replied, checking his medical equipment, each piece concealing weapons or tools for their true mission. He'll expect subterfuge, not a frontal approach. Royal guards escorted them through decontamination and into the heart of the palace medical wing. Asher noted with clinical detachment how many citizens filled the beds. Ravok had allowed the outbreak to spread, prioritizing security over public health. Our first priority is assessing containment protocols, Asher announced to the harried medical staff, his voice altered by his helmet's vocoder. Will need access to environmental systems and population distribution data. The senior physician, a Theian female with graying fur, hesitated. Those systems are under military control now. Regent Ravok's orders unacceptable, Kiera stated, her disguised voice carrying the authority she'd been born to wield. Consortium protocols supersede local governance during Class 3 outbreaks, or would the Regent prefer we declare a sector-wide emergency? The physician's ears flattened in submission. I'll arrange access with it. Hours they had mapped the palace's security systems and confirmed the location of loyal staff who had survived. Ravix purges Commander Lyra's team disguised as medical support personnel. Strategically positioned themselves throughout the complex as night fell. Asher and Kalira made their way to the central environmental control hub, the nexus from which they could implement the next phase of their planned security checkpoint ahead. Asher warned, nodding the armed guards, 2 centuries military grade weapons. Kalira's posture shifted subtly. Follow my lead, she stumbled forward, her breathing suddenly labored and audible through her suit's external speakers. Asher rushed to support her, calling out in alarm, medical emergency containment. Breach. The guards stepped back. Instinctively, the fear of contagion overriding their training, Asher used the distraction to deploy a localized nerve agent carefully calibrated to render the guards unconscious without permanent harm. His veterinary knowledge, originally meant for healing, had proven unexpectedly valuable in combat situations. Inside the control room, they worked with practiced efficiency, Kaler overriding security protocols while Asher prepared the modified atmospheric controls that would deliver Commander Lyra's signal a subtle change in the palace's ambient temperature that would alert their allies to begin the coordinated uprising. Intruders in environmental control, a mechanical voice suddenly announced throughout the facility. Security lockdown initiated. We've been compromised. Kalira snarled, fingers flying over the control panel. Ravok must have upgraded the biometric sensors. Asher completed the temperature adjustments just as the first explosion rocked the palace. Their allies had begun the assault. Early adaptation rather than abandonment of their plan. We need to reach the Grand Council chamber, Kalira said, discarding her cumbersome disguise. With evidence of Rav's treason, I can invoke the ancient right of challenge. They fought their way through increasingly chaotic corridors, loyalists clashing with Ravik's forces as the carefully orchestrated rebellion unfolded. Asher's medical training served a grim purpose as he targeted pressure points and vulnerable anatomy with precision, incapacitating opponents with minimal force. Outside the council chamber, they found Commander Lyra wounded but standing guard, a circle of fallen enemies surrounding her position. Rav is inside with the remaining council members, she reported, blood matting her dark fur. He's threatening executions if the rebellion isn't crushed immediately. Kaler's eyes met Asher's, a silent communication passing between them, the culmination of months of shared danger and intimate understanding. I'll create a distraction at the service entrance, Asher said, checking his remaining equipment. You challenge him directly as tradition demands, he'll kill you. Kali growled, claws extending involuntarily. Asher smiled grimly, held try before she could object further. He kissed her fiercely, heedless of Commander Elra's startled expression, and disappeared down a side corridor. Minutes later, as Kalira burst through the chamber's main doors with Commander LRA at her side, the emergency ventilation system exploded in a cascade of smoke and debris through the chaos. Asher slipped inside, positioning himself among the panicked counselors. Ravik stood on the ceremonial platform, his ornate regalia failing to disguise the madness in his eyes. The traitor returns, he snarled, drawing in ceremonial blade. Come to die with your remaining supporters, cousin. I come to reclaim what is mine by right of blood and law, Kalira replied, her voice carrying throughout the chamber. I challenge you under the ancient right. Ravik's laugh was hollow. Challenge? You bring a wounded commander and expect to overthrow me. My forces control the capital. Not anymore, Commander LRA stated, activating a holographic display showing Ravik's troops surrendering throughout the palace. Your mercenaries abandon you as we speak. Ravik's composure cracked. With a feral scream, he lunged at Kira, blade slashing toward her throat. She sidestepped with the fluid grace Asher had come to adore, but Ravik's second hidden weapon, an energy pistol, appeared in his hand, aimed at her heart. Asher moved without conscious thought, years of precise medical work translating to perfect aim. As he threw a surgical scalpel, the blade embedded itself in Ravik's wrist, the energy pistol discharging harmlessly into the ceiling. As he howled in pain, interference, Rav shrieked, an alien intervenes in sacred combat. The challenge is invalid, not interference, Kalira corrected, advancing on her Wounded Cousin Alliance Dr. Hayes acts as my lawful companion just as Nyx does on. Q. The striped creature padded into the chamber-taking position. Beside Asher, the ancient laws make no specification about the species of one's companions. A murmur ran through the gathered counselors, a technical reading of their most sacred traditions that none could dispute with calculated precision. Kalira disarmed her cousin and forced him to his knees. The council will judge your crimes, she declared, but the people will witness your shame. As royal guards loyal to Kalira secured Ravik, Asher stepped forward to stand beside her, no longer hidden, no longer in disguise, his human presence on the ceremonial platform sent another ripple of shock through the assembly. Counselors of Thea, Kalira announced, her voice steady and clear. I present to you Dr. Asher Hayes, the man who saved your rightful ruler, who helped Davies the strategy that liberated our capital, who stands as living proof that our future lies in cooperation, not isolation. One by one, the counselors bowed their heads in that silent, hallowed moment. Destiny and duty converged as Dr. Asher Hayes stepped forward to stand beside Kalira, his human resolve intertwining with her royal legacy, with the rebellion now affirmed and the old regime crumbling beneath the weight of truth. The assembled assembly recognized a future born not of tradition but of transformative unity, a future where the bond between a simple veterinarian and a defiant baroness would illuminate a path toward healing, not just bodies, but entire worlds outside, beneath a cosmos that whispered of infinite hope. Kalira and Asher exchanged a final determined glance, sealing their vow to forge a new era of compassion and strength that would echo through the ages.